So you want a great looking retro bike, but also that's not too much of a pooch. Well, two of the best options on the market, in my opinion, are the Triumph Speed Twin 900 and Ducati Scrambler Icon, although they are actually surprisingly similar, and so it might be a tricky call between the two. So in this video, we'll go through all of the key review categories to tell you which one is right for you. As always, we'll start with the engine, and they're both twin cylinders of a similar-ish capacity, but they're actually quite different in terms of character. The Triumph has slightly more displacement at 900cc, and it's the high torque tune of their Bonneville parallel twin, so this one makes a healthy 80 Nm of peak torque, nice and low in the rev range at 3,800 RPM. Being just 803cc and tuned for a bit more top end, the Scrambler is lighter on torque at 65 Nm peak, and it also makes it much higher in the rev range at 7,000 RPM. The flip side, of course, is because the Scrambler is a touch more happy revving out, well, it makes a good 8 horsepower more at the top with 72 peak at 8,250, whereas the Triumph makes 64 horsepower at 7,500 RPM. Now, there are some other differences. The Triumph is liquid-cooled, the Scrambler is air-cooled. The Triumph is a 5-speed, the Scrambler gets a 6-speed box, and it can also be spec'd up with a quick shifter accessory, whereas the Speed Twin, unfortunately, cannot. But really, I think the key difference here is in those performance figures, with the Triumph pulling super strong in the low revs before running out of steam at the top, and so it's probably the one for blasting away from the lights and for those who don't particularly like to wring a bike's neck. The Scrambler, though, is a bit more fun on the open road, especially if you like to hold on to the gears. Now, Triumph updated the Speed Twin 900 for 2025, and one of the most upgraded areas was undoubtedly the chassis. You see, while the frame has stayed largely the same, well, you now get lighter wheels, a lighter swing arm, a radially mounted 4-piston own-branded front brake caliper, and Marzocchi suspension front and rear with an upside-down fork and piggyback shocks. Having owned one of the previous gen bikes, I will say that whilst it was pleasant enough for wafting along on, well, it wasn't particularly rewarding when you started to push it hard, and I'd definitely say that was one of the areas in which it really did lag behind the Ducati. This new 2025 version, though, is much improved and much more enjoyable on a good twisty back road, but there's still one key difference that unfortunately you just can't get around. You see, the Scrambler is similar in many regards, with the oversized 18-inch front wheel, the upside-down fork, the single disc up front with the radial caliper, but thing is, the whole package weighs in at a smidge under 190 kilograms fully fueled up, which is a good 25 kilograms or so lighter than the Triumph. To me, the Scrambler had always felt the more chuckable, the more lively, the more agile bike of the two, and whilst Triumph have done a great deal to improve the Speed Twin now, well, I'd still say that's the case, just by a smaller margin. The Speed Twin, though, is still a very pleasant ride, perhaps just not so sporty, and that's also reflected somewhat in the ergonomics. In fact, one of the reasons I think it's been their best-selling modern classic bike over the past few years is the very low and accessible seat height that makes it ideal for shorter riders, those who like to firmly plant both feet at a stop, and anyone looking for an easy bike to ride in tricky, heavy traffic. Previous generations came in at a super low 765mm, and while the 2025 model has been elevated slightly to 780, well, there is now a low seat option in the accessories catalogue that makes it even lower still at 760mm. Music to the ears of shorter riders, I'm sure. The Scrambler, on the other hand, well, it comes in a touch taller at 795mm as standard, but you can go either up or down with an accessory, with a high seat that comes in at 810mm and a low seat at 780. So some nice options with each, but the only thing I will say that's a bit quirky about the Scrambler Icon is the high set handlebar position, which I guess pays homage to the original Ducati Scramblers of the 1960s. It definitely has you nice and upright, which might be a good thing if you like to keep your back straight, but it perhaps doesn't quite suit that more sporty, light chassis that I mentioned earlier, and so personally I prefer the flatter bars on the night shift or full throttle variants. Unfortunately though, you have to pay quite a bit more for those two, although there is a flatter bar in the accessories catalogue for the Icon version, which comes in at around about 200 quid. So this one for me me is pretty simple. If you want to go low, go Triumph, and if you want to be a bit higher up and sportier, providing you sort the bars out, then it's the Ducati. Another area in which Triumph have really sought to catch up with the competition is the tech, with cornering-sensitive traction control and ABS, riding modes, LED lighting, self-cancelling indicators, a USB-C socket and a new digital dash, all added to the Speedtwin 900 as standard for 2025. Then if you dig into the accessories, you can fit heated grips, cruise control, tyre pressure monitoring, a tracker, and their Bluetooth connectivity module so you can get calls, media, and nav through the switchgear and dash, and so you've got to say it's pretty much right up there with any other modern day bike in terms of the tech package. The Ducati is pretty similar. There's a TFT dash with connectivity, there's a ride-by-wire throttle which means it gets a couple of riding modes, there's lean-sensitive rider aids, and also the quick shifter option that I've already mentioned. But I do think which bike you'll prefer out of the two will realistically come down to the dash. The Triumph, you see, is a kind of hybrid with the inverted LCD at the top for the basic riding information like speed, revs and gear position, but then a smaller TFT display at the bottom for menus, connectivity and the more complex stuff like that. Now, I've owned a bike with this dash, the Trident 660, and I will say it works perfectly well. In fact, it's really easy to read out on the road at a glance, but I do know from the comments on our videos about the many Triumphs that use this dash that not everybody loves it, and in fact, some people pretty much seem to hate the idea of it. The TFT on the Scrambler then is much less offensive. I'm sure some true retro fans would still prefer an analog dash, but at least a good old rectangular TFT dash is fairly neutral, and so maybe it'll be easier to get on with for more riders. All I will say is if it's the only thing that's putting you off buying one, then do still give the Triumph Dash a shot on a demo ride. But if you still don't like it, the Ducati has pretty much all the same tech, just in a more conventional form factor. Now, one of the big similarities between these two bikes, in my opinion, is the looks. Not because they necessarily look the same, but because they have pretty much the same ethos. You see, both are based on a predecessor, the Triumph on the older Bonnevilles, the Scrambler on the original Ducati Scrambler, and you can still see that in some of the design features like the tank shape or the color choices, or in the Triumph's case, the way the engine has been designed to look. But at the same time, both of these two particular models have taken this retro or heritage format and really pushed the boundaries of it, with the latest iterations of each getting squared off a bit with a more sporty look, louder paint jobs, and more modern finishing touches. In my opinion, neither are quite as pleasing on the eye as a truly retro like the T120, but I still think they're pretty nice looking bikes that do their own things fairly well. This one is always down to personal taste, and so do let me know which one you think looks the best down in the comments below. On to the all-important price though, and this one almost certainly has to go in the Triumph's favour. A Speedtwin 900 in its base silver paint job comes in at £9,195, whereas the Ducati starts £1,000 more at £10,195. Then the Triumph gets a couple of other paint jobs for another £350 on top, whereas the Scrambler Icon is available in a wide range of cover kits, but again, they're the best part of £300, and so however you want the bike to look is still going to be roughly an extra £1,000. The only slight caveat here is the Scrambler Icon Dark, a matte black version that gets a simpler, more affordable finish, and they've done this by omitting some of the details like the paint blocks on the wheels, the graphics on the side panels, or the little rear mudguard. That one costs £9,495, so a bit more competitive with the Triumph, but I still think you've got to say that in terms of value for money, the Speedtwin has the edge. So in summary, if you're on a budget, you want a low-slung bike, or generally prefer a low-end torquey delivery from the engine, then go for the Triumph, providing you can get along with that Marmite dash. If, however, you like to rev a bike a bit harder, if you like something light that can dance between corners, and also if you prefer to be sat a little higher up, then the Scrambler is more likely to be the bike for you. As always though, I'd love to know which bike you'd pick, so do let me know down in the comments below, and I'll also make a playlist of our full reviews of each of these bikes so you can give them a watch if you haven't already. Do hit subscribe for more of the latest motorcycle news and reviews right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.